What's up guys? Finally, yes finally, I have the Worker Harrier. I know many of you have been waiting quite a while to see my thoughts on this blaster. Sad story actually, I could have filmed this review back in January. But the Australian Border Force seized my package from Zenduo Toys. Then in February, they tried to send me another one, and that was seized too. Well, most of it. I actually did receive half a Harrier from Zenduo, and I'll make use of that for some demonstration purposes throughout this video. But the saving grace for me getting a Harrier was actually Frontline Foam. Whether it was the friendly post-it note they left in the box, or the change in colour from a blue one to an orange one, or maybe the Australian government just trusts the USA more than they trust China. Regardless of the reason, I finally received a complete Worker Harrier. Check out Frontline Foam at the link down below. The Worker Harrier is a mag-fed manual pump-action Nerf Springer with a few standout features that separate it from other blasters in its price range of about $185 US. For starters, the external build quality is rock solid. While I wouldn't say it's quite as tough as something like the Saber M20, and of course it lacks the moisture protective qualities of Delrin in those higher humidity areas like Singapore and Malaysia, the Worker Harrier does feel like a step up over what both Nerf and Dart Zone are making. It has a lot of nice to have features too. For example, the return spring on the prime means that the breech will stay closed even if you point the blaster straight up. It also has threaded barrels, so you can very quick and easily swap between different lengths depending on which spring you're using. The Harrier comes with a 310mm barrel and a 365mm barrel. Both of these have a 13mm internal diameter, and I should note though that the thread that's on these barrels is different than other companies use. For example, the old Jet Blaster barrels won't work on this blaster. Another nice to have is that Worker have included a rifling attachment which just friction fits onto the end of the barrel. And that out of the box upgrade will add spin to your darts to improve accuracy. The fitment of that Scar barrel does feel a little bit loose by hand, but when you actually fire darts through it, even with the strongest 300 FPS spring, it did not come loose, even after an entire day of gameplay. Another handy feature of the Worker Harrier is quick access to the internals. Remove 2 screws on the top Picatinny, and then remove 2 hand-tight thumb screws in the side of the blaster. With those removed, just pull the front half away from the back half, and that'll give you direct access to the plunger rod and the spring. I should quickly mention that I'm actually using an aftermarket metal CNC plunger in my Harrier, and I picked this up while I was in Singapore thanks to Saber and brought it home in my luggage. I'll put a link to it down below. But the reason I'm using this metal plunger is because on the very first shot on the 1.6 spring, my stock plastic plunger snapped in half at the threaded part. Here's a quick video demonstration of Conrad from Saber testing the same weak point where mine broke. Now, some of you might think that being twice the weight, the metal plunger might drop the FPS. You'd be right to assume that I thought the same thing. But despite being heavier than the plastic one, it's still pretty light overall. And as you'll see in my chrono test later on, I think it may even exceed Worker's velocity claims. I've heard that Saber will also be making a CNC metal catch for the Harrier. The stock plastic catch has held up for me so far, but I have heard of some people having issues after putting 800 or more shots through the blaster. When putting the two halves back together, something you could choose to do is leave the front half Picatinny rail screws out. That way, you'd only need to use the thumb screws when you want to disassemble the blaster. However, there'll be a slight flex to the Harrier side to side, and the Picatinny rail itself will then be able to flex upwards. So for the extra 10 seconds it takes to put the screws back in, I'd just do that. Aside from the top Picatinny rail, the Harrier also has a Picatinny rail on each side of the blaster, plus a lower Picatinny rail. Additionally, the shotgun grip attaches using Picatinny rail 2, so you could very easily swap out the included vertical grip for something else if you prefer. In fact, included in the box is a side priming bar, which you could use if you want to, but I would never use that. The Harrier has a rear paddle mag release, and it comes with a short 5-dart sniper mag designed to match the look of the blaster. I think most of you though, and myself included, would just slap a Worker Talon mag in there for 15 shot capacity. Unlike some of the earlier Worker blasters and the Sig Spear, you can't over-insert the mag because the mag lips will hit this metal guide that prevents it going in any further. The Harrier also has a skinny breech, which means you can insert or remove the mag with the bolt closed. Something I didn't notice straight away is there's actually a safety on this blaster. This small black square above the trigger, push it from the left hand side to put on safe, and it mechanically blocks the trigger. Push it back through to the fire position from the right hand side of the blaster, and you can obviously, well, fire the blaster now. The trigger pull itself is actually pretty nice. There's some slight slack to take up, but then you hit a solid wall that you can definitely feel, and if you go any further than that, it's like a hair trigger. The prime of the blaster is very smooth too. I wouldn't say it's linear bearing M20 levels of smooth, but it's quite nice indeed. I actually sprayed some WD-40 onto the barrel that it slides along, and it became one of the lightest primes I've ever felt for the velocity it puts out. But I'll get into the velocity in a second. The grip of the Harrier has a nice rubberized texture on it with a small Worker logo on the bottom. However, there's nothing holding the front of it in place, so it can slide around a bit. In front of the grip, it has a cutlass style guard for your fingers, similar to the Tava X95. A pretty unique feature that I haven't seen on any other Nerf blasters before. Up top, there's a fixed front and rear iron sight. I have to say these are just for decoration though. They're really not usable at all. They sit so low down that you have to crush your cheek into the stock just to get anywhere close to a sight picture. So I definitely recommend just putting a red dot sight on the Picatinny rails and calling it a day. Another pointless accessory is the decorative fluted barrel. It fits over the standard barrels, but it's both way too long, at least for the stock barrels, and it doesn't fit a scar barrel inside of it. So I can't think of a reason I'd ever use this unless you're just putting it on the wall as a decoration. Now coming to the rear of the Harrier, it has a standard buffer tube which accepts Airsoft or Gel Blaster M4 stocks. The stock included with the Harrier is kind of low quality compared to the rest of the blaster, but you could easily swap that out for something much better. And no, that's not rubber at the back of the stock. Also, hidden away at the back, which I almost didn't even notice, is an Allen key which suits the Picatinny rail screws, making it an even more compelling case for just tightening them all up. But that's the overview pretty much covered, so that brings me to the testing now. Included with the blaster are two 1.4mm springs of different lengths, 250mm and 280mm. Frontline Foam also sent me an upgraded 1.6mm by 300mm spring. So first up, I'll chrono the weakest of the three springs with the shortest of the barrels. $165, $170, $167, $177, $175, $180, $169, $170, $173, $171, $170, $179, $169, $177, $170, and that must be all the 15 shots fired. With the weakest spring and the shortest barrel, I got a high of 180, low of 165, average of 172, and a standard deviation of 4.4. This has got to be one of the lightest primes I've ever felt hitting 180s. I could definitely see kids using this one out on the field, and after lubricating the barrel that the priming block slides along, you can actually improve the prime even further. Next, I'll chrono the longer 1.4mm spring, which also comes with the blaster, but I'll keep the same 310mm barrel. 187, 190, 188, 191, 192, duplicate 192, 183, 192, 190, 195, 193, duplicate 193,
193 again. What? 193 again. 188. That must be all the 15 shots. I'd say this one's probably good for you 200 FPS cap players.
With the longer stock spring and the short barrel, I got a high of 195, low of 183, average of 190, and a standard deviation of 3. So with this particular setup, it's hitting just within that 200 FPS limit that a lot of US nerfers play under. A standard deviation of 3 with Worker bamboo darts is incredibly consistent too. I think this would make a great blaster for competitive nerf. So now I'll chrono with the sold separately 1.6mm upgrade spring, along with the included longer 365mm barrel.
298. 310. 314. 292. 298. 308. 287. 289. Listen to that slap the target behind. 298. 308. 308 again. 306. 296. 310. 292. And that's all 15.
With that setup, I got a high of 314, low of 287, average of 300, and a standard deviation of 8.6. Well, this is definitely the spring for me. 300 feet per second average with a standard deviation of 8.6. Not bad at all for a budget 300 FPS blaster. This does exceed Worker's own claims of 260 to 270 feet per second, so I do wonder whether the Saber plunger rod has a better seal or something. But since my Worker plunger rod broke immediately on the 1.6 spring, I can't really say for sure. I'm very happy with this performance though. Finally, I'm going to do an accuracy test with the strongest spring and the strongest barrel from a distance of 30 meters away from the target. I've also attached Worker's included rifling, which should help with accuracy.
Hit. 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 Going a little right of target there. Speak too soon. Hit. Hit. I haven't changed where I'm aiming. Hit. 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 I could see that was spinning a little bit in the air though. Hit. Hit. That's all 15 shots. Every single one was a hit. I do think though that some of the darts were spinning a little bit in the air, where normally with any other scar barrel they'd just go straight. So maybe you could get better accuracy by swapping this for a better one.
From a distance of 30 meters away, the Worker Harrier with Worker bamboo darts and Worker rifling shot a circular shape spread 60 centimeters in size. The 60 centimeter horizontal spread is likely from the rifling not having enough spin to stabilize the darts, and the 60 centimeter vertical spread would be from velocity variations, which is standard for pretty much every Nerf blaster. I think you could improve the horizontal spread with a better scar barrel, but I thought it was best to show you the one that comes with the blaster. But after using the Harrier for a day of gameplay, what are my final thoughts on it? Overall, I am pretty impressed with the Harrier. Sure, it has its issues like the plunger breaking and catching issues after putting enough shots through it, but those can be solved with third-party metal parts thanks to Saber. This thing is a cheap alternative to something like the M20, and a few players on the Malaysian side at Operation Silent Night were even using Harriers against us, so it can definitely compete. The plastic construction is thick and solid, though I'd probably swap out the buttstock to a nicer airsoft or gel blaster one. I will say the iron sights are absolute garbage unusable. Definitely put a red dot sight on here. These are way too low to actually be practical. The included worker rifling is not the best either. I've never actually liked this type of rifling. I'd go with a bearing scar or string scar over that any day to help improve that horizontal spread. For the price of the Harrier though, you're getting a high performance starting point to improve upon, or if you only play low FPS, the higher air volume of this blaster over say something from Dart Zone will give you a higher FPS with a lower prime effort required, allowing younger nerfers to compete in competitive events, or older ones to not have a sore arm by the end of the day. Additionally, if you live somewhere like Australia, Dart Zone blasters cost like $300 to $400, and they're worse than this thing. So the Harrier is going to be super popular in these areas. If you want to pick up a Worker Harrier, check out Frontline Foam at the link down below. If you want the CNC metal plunger or soon to be released CNC metal catch, check out Saber at those links down below as well. That's all I have for you today. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Give this video a like or a dislike on the way out to let me know what you thought of it. Here's 2 other videos you might enjoy, and as always, thanks for watching. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.